Hi, this is Andrew Wolf. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the physiology of weight loss and the pathophysiology of obesity. In fact, I'm going to create a series of 3 videos talking about this subject. Now, when we're talking about weight loss, first we need to understand what weight is. And of course, we've got here we have a obese person, and you can see they've got, and this person has lots and lots of fat, and it could be subcutaneous fat or visceral fat, fat that's in the abdomen around the organs. Now, what is this fat? Well, the fat is the way the body stores energy. It stores it in adipose tissue or fat tissue. Adipose tissue is made up of adipocytes, a small amount of connective tissue, and adipocytes or adipose tissue in general is made up of 87% lipids. And lipids, when we talk about lipids in the body, we're generally talking about triglycerides. Triglycerides are called triglycerides because they have 3 glycerol groups, and these glycerol groups are connected to these long chains of carbon and hydrogen. So basically, you can see here, this is a large complex molecule, and there are many, many high energy bonds which hold the molecule together in the body. So the body's basically storing energy in these chemical bonds. Okay, so when the body needs the energy, it breaks down these chemical bonds and removes the energy. So basically, we have this complex molecule that looks like this. So there's 55 carbons, 104 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. When this breaks down, we end up with a chemical formula that looks like this. So we need to add 78 oxygens, and then this makes 55 carbon dioxides plus 52 molecules of H2O, and then plus energy. Okay, so the energy again is the energy that is stored in the high energy bonds of this large and complex molecule. When it gets broken down, it is released. Okay, so that's how the body stores the energy. So I know this is a review for most of you, but it's really important to think about when we're talking about weight loss, we are talking about a negative energy balance, right? So in order to lose weight, we have to have a negative energy balance. So what does that mean? Well, let's talk a little bit about energy. So in order to understand the way that energy works in the body, we really have to sort of understand the basic physics principles of energy. So we need to talk about the first law of thermodynamics. And basically, the first law of thermodynamics states that energy is conserved. Can't be either. It can't be created. It can't be destroyed. So basically, what that means is the energy that we take in to our body over our lifetimes has to equal the energy that comes out. Okay? So, but this is over our entire lifetimes as an organism, because in between the time that energy is going in and energy is coming out, lots and lots of energy is being stored. You know, so energy is being stored in muscles and in our brains and in any organ that has complex molecules, proteins, um, and carbohydrates, as well as fat. Okay, so our body is an energy store of chemically stored energy that is stored in these complex molecules. Okay, so when we have excess energy in, if energy in is greater than energy out, then we end up storing it. Our body ends up storing it in adipose tissue by making extra triglycerides, and we get fat. Okay, so let's talk about a very simple formula here. So in our bodies, energy in has to equal energy out plus energy stored. Okay? Now, we are concerned about weight loss And remember, weight loss means that we need to have a negative energy balance. So we're really interested in what's being stored in the adipose tissue. So I'm going to manipulate this formula, and we're going to end up with energy stored equals energy in minus energy out. Okay, simple formula, but it's really important to understand the sort of underlying process, the underlying concept of where the stored energy is coming from. So basically what this is saying is the amount of fat that we have in our body is a consequence of the difference between energy that we take in and energy that we remove. And we remove it in various ways, and we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. Now, a lot of people make the assumption that that we have conscious control over all aspects of the energy we take in and the energy that we use. So we make a common fallacy, which basically states that the amount of fat that we have is a function solely of eating and exercising, right? So if you want to lose fat or lose weight, you need to eat less and exercise more to reduce this distance. Okay? But this is a fallacy because it assumes that we have conscious control over energy in and energy out, when in fact we actually have limited control over different aspects of this equation because our body is constantly modulating the amount of energy we take in through our appetite, and we have very little conscious control over most of the energy that we use in our body from a day-to-day basis. So this is a fallacy. The amount of fat that we have is related to the amount that we eat and the amount that we exercise, but there are other factors to consider, and that's what we're going to talk about now. Okay, one of the major impacts on the amount of food that we take in or the amount of energy that we take in is our appetite. And we're going to talk in the next video about exactly what controls that appetite, but essentially it's controlled primarily by hormones in our body. And what's fascinating about appetite is our body wants to keep our weight the same. And in fact, it has a bias against losing weight. It actually is less resistant to gaining weight than it is to losing weight. So it has a strong bias against losing weight. So the more weight that we lose, the stronger our appetite becomes. Okay? Now another factor is our conscious choices, right? Or willpower if you're working on dieting. So what happens is, if you are trying to lose weight, there is a battle between your willpower and your appetite, and the more weight that you lose, the stronger your appetite becomes. So we know from research that the majority of people fail at dieting, and if they're able to diet at all, they have a hard time losing more than 10% of our body weight, because as we get down to weight loss of more than 10% of our body weight, our appetite increases. So it becomes very, very difficult. So again, we talked about a fallacy, and the fallacy is that, this is not just simply a conscious choice of how much we eat. This is not just about willpower. Well, how come people just can't eat less? That's because our body is actively fighting against us by increasing the drive to eat. Okay, so let's talk about energy out. This gets even more interesting because, again, we think of it just about eating less and exercising more. Well, the fact is that exercise actually only accounts for about 10% of the energy we use from a day-to-day basis. What makes up the 90%? Well, basal metabolic rate makes up about 70% of our energy use from day-to-day in our day-to-day life. Basal metabolic rate essentially accounts for sort of ion movements that's happening in cells, muscle movements of unconscious movement like peristalsis in the gut, breathing, the heart beating, etc. So basal metabolic rate, and what's interesting is the body is really does not like a negative energy balance. It wants to maintain this storage of energy. So what does it do? When we lose weight, when this energy store is going down, the body actually fights against us and decreases the basal metabolic rate. So even if we try to increase this exercise to 20 or 30%, the body can actively fight against us by reducing the amount of energy we're using from our basal metabolic rate. Okay, so 70 plus 10%, we're only up to 80%. So what else is there? Well, there's something called the thermic energy of food. And this is basically the amount of energy that we use to digest, absorb, and metabolize the foods that we eat. Okay, so again, it's not something that we have conscious control over. In fact, the more food that we eat, the more thermic energy of food we have. Now, there are some foods that have higher thermic energy values, but this is not really an effective way to lose weight because it's not going to increase the percentage all that much. If you eat higher fiber foods, it tends to have a higher thermic energy, so that helps a little bit. And eating protein versus fats, proteins have a higher thermic energy, so they use more energy to digest, absorb, or metabolize. Now, and then there's also non-exercise activities. So actually, it's interesting here is fidgeting is included here, and there's some people that fidget much more than others, and they end up burning maybe up to like 800 calories more per day just because they fidget. It can be a very annoying habit, but it can help you lose weight. So what if you increase your exercise? Well, if you started running 5 miles per day, you could increase your exercise to up to 30% of your energy use. Okay, so if you ran a marathon every day, you could increase it even more, and that would be significant impact on the amount of energy that you expend. But if you're running 5 miles per day, you can increase your exercise, the energy that is expended from exercise, to about 30% of your total energy expenditure. But still, you can see the major contributors for the energy expenditures is still not going to be exercise. And the body, again, is actively fighting against weight loss by will fight against it by decreasing basal metabolic rate and increasing appetite. So again, I just want to say that the major takeaway here is weight loss, if it were easy, if it was as simple as eating less and exercising more, then we would all be walking around thin. The reason why it's so difficult to lose weight is because our body is actively working against us because it has a bias against losing stored energy. And there's evolutionary reasons for this, of course, but it fights against losing weight by increasing our appetite and decreasing our basal metabolic rate. In our next video, we're going to talk about mechanisms of central control through our hypothalamus, and also controls through hormonal controls of the body, exactly how this happens, how this modulates. And in the third video, we're going to talk about sort of some ways to work with the systems that we have to lose weight in spite of our body's bias against losing weight. Okay, I look forward to seeing you in the next video.